Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stephanie Landrum. I'm the President and CEO of the Alexandria Economic Development Partnership. Thank you for joining us for part of our Back to Business Preparing to Reopen series. My co-host is our Alexandria Planning Director, Carl Moritz. And over the last 10 days, we have hosted a number of these sessions focused on sharing information and educating the business community about how to reopen under the Forward Virginia guidelines. And so for this group of commercial real estate professionals and hotels, there's a bunch of different information that we're going to share with you. But to be honest, the guidelines have been a little less distinct and transparent. And so a lot of what we're going to talk with you about today are best practices that we have compiled from various sources, and then also give you some information about resources here at the city level. So for our agenda today, we're going to go through, I'll walk you through who's going to be on the panel, provide an overview of the general guidelines that came from the governor and his committee. Then we're going to talk through the back to the office and best practices for buildings. We also have a section on hotels. And then we'll go through the temporary outdoor dining program and use of on-street parking for a lot of the businesses in Alexandria. As commercial real estate entities, we thought you might be interested in understanding those programs. The health department will talk through their ALX promise. We'll give you a quick overview of our back to business grants that many of your tenants are hopefully pursuing. And then we'll go into questions and answers. And then as an added bonus, we have some forecast research and promotion information from Visit Alexandria for those who are working in the hospitality and hotel industry. So we will move through today's agenda, but if you have questions at any point, please use the chat function or the Q&A, and we will endeavor to answer all of your questions. So for our panelists, I mentioned Carl and myself. We also have joining us Alex Block, who is with the Department of Transportation and is a great resource to talk to about some of the parking initiatives and changes. Erin Miller, who is with the Alexandria Health Department, who will answer all of your very difficult questions the best that she can. My colleague, Christina Mindrup, who heads up the real estate function in our Economic Development Office, and Tom Caden, who is the Chief Operating Officer for Visit Alexandria. So I think almost everyone knows that for a number of weeks / months, we were in what was called Phase 0. And we graduated from Phase 0 last Friday, which was a complete stay-at-home order where many businesses and buildings were closed. For the last week, we have been in Phase 1, which is deemed safer at home, and it is expected to last anywhere between 2 or 4 weeks. Movement between each of these phases is dictated by a combination of health metrics being tracked by our health department, both regionally, but also at the state level. And ultimately, the governor makes the decision about movement between phases. Today, many parts of Virginia, the majority of the parts of Virginia, are actually moving into Phase 2, but Northern Virginia remains in Phase 1. And then ultimately what we are all angling for is to successfully and healthily get to Phase 3, which at this point will likely be later this summer. And again, with each one of these phases, there have been a set of guidelines or recommendations that have been passed on from the state. So the general guidelines that pertain to commercial entities like the buildings or businesses that you all represent really didn't receive very specific guidelines for how to operate your buildings. But there were very specific guidelines for many of the businesses that locate inside of your buildings, like restaurants, brick and mortar retail, fitness businesses, and personal care and grooming. So if anyone's interested in that information, we have videos of sessions that we did with those businesses last week, but also have a lot of information about what is required of those businesses in Phase 1 and Phase 2. The impact on your buildings as a result of all of this is that you've pretty much had limited, and in some instances, no occupancy of your buildings for weeks at this point. You likely are also receiving requests from your tenants to use shared outdoor spaces to conduct business, as many of the guidelines for Phase 1 and Phase 2 require a lot of activity to happen external to inside spaces. And then the other thing I think that we're going to touch on here today is we wanted you to be thinking about what building systems have you not been using or have been sort of in a dormant phase, and what are your responsibilities and best practices for exercising those before people start returning to your buildings. So from, again, from a general perspective, all of the guidelines and recommendations as you're thinking about reopening your buildings or are in the process of reopening them should really be focused on helping people maintain the physical distance that is recommended through the health department, providing clear communication for people who will be coming into your buildings and using them, limiting the occupancy of sort of common areas that you're responsible for maintaining and managing. We wanted you to understand that telework is still highly recommended whenever possible. So when you think about your tenants and what business decisions they're making, know that telework is encouraged / required, essentially moving forward through phases 1 and 2. And that many of your tenants are limiting all of their in-person gatherings and meetings and conferences. And so just want you all to be thinking about that as it relates to your business. The image here is actually a sign that the City of Alexandria has created. They've created a variety of really nice looking signs and posters that all can be downloaded and printed for free. We've provided the link here. We're going to send this presentation out when we're done with today's meeting. And so I'm not going to go through these as Christina is going to speak with you in detail about a lot of the recommendations, but the recommendations for you all to really be thinking about fall into the categories of cleaning and disinfecting and enhancing how people use and operate your buildings and your facilities. The one thing that I will point out on the slide that you all might have questions about is that if your building has not been occupied for 7 days, there are additional public health considerations related to the safety of your water system and flushing. And so we've provided a link here and can potentially answer some questions there if you haven't thought through that. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Christina and I will advance the slides for you, Christina, as you go through.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Christina Mendrup. As Stephanie has mentioned, I'm with AEDP in real estate. As many of you are in the process of establishing new health and safety protocols in anticipation of opening your building, we wanted to share with you some of the best practices that we've seen. Based upon what we are hearing nationwide, the 2 most important factors to employees coming back to work is the feeling of safety and wellness, and it starts at the building entrance. If upon working into your building, the building feels organized and clean, the employee's experience is going to be that much more confident and a feeling of safety. Mandating a mask, as Stephanie mentioned, throughout the common areas of the building, as well as visibly displaying hand sanitizer dispensers throughout is obviously a good first step. And it is also recommended that buildings should remain locked with card keyed access to allow for proper safety procedures once you walk in the door. It is suggested to add stanchions and visible signage to help educate the public and to new traffic patterns and to avoid passing one another too closely. And to the extent available, adding directional signage on the floor will also help encourage safe circulation and distance. Creating an easily identifiable check-in station for visitors and contractors, as well as delivery personnel, should be mandated in the lobby or designated in another access point of the building. Even suggesting that businesses escort their guests to the lobby is recommended. As for elevators and stairwells, most elevators can accommodate a maximum of 2 people with safe distances. But some of the smaller buildings in Old Town, our elevators might be limited to 1 person. So utilizing a stairwell will become necessary if not helpful to alleviate delays. Also helpful would be displaying signage on the floor to indicate where to stand while waiting for an elevator. In order to reduce touch points, all existing automated door openers at the building entrances should be utilized and or budgeted to be added in the future. Where security and fire life safety permits you, it is suggested to prop open any interior doors. In the future, much like security access cards, any handheld button pushers should be provided to tenants with the option to buy more if needed. And again, tenants are encouraged to take the stairs if possible. Stairwells should be designated as 1 way up and 1 way down. And for security purposes, card readers should be added at some point. In restrooms, foot-operated door openers should be added. In the interim, we're hearing from property managers that they're either propping them open or leaving them open. Increased frequency of cleaning and disinfection, utilizing EPA-registered disinfectants that are effective in killing viruses is a good first step. And consider adding signage in restrooms to encourage social distancing and reinforce the CDC hand washing guidelines. We are even seeing in larger restrooms, management staff removing sink handles from every other sink in order to encourage social distancing, as well as closing every other restroom stall. Next slide. And a little bit furthermore on cleaning, a 24-hour strategy should be developed for the cleaning, disinfecting, and sanitizing of all common areas and high-touch surfaces, as well as adding supplemental cleaning staff and services to assist with increased cleaning and disinfection, especially during the daytime hours. As for amenity spaces such as fitness centers and conference rooms, it is advised that they should remain closed at this time. Bike rooms, should they be in your building, should be open in order to encourage tenants to use alternative transportation methods instead of mass transit. And when amenity spaces do reopen, seating arrangements should be modified in order to promote social distancing. As for parking, tenants and visitors are encouraged to use contactless payment options such as the Park Mobile system. If you do have parking attendants, they should be required to wear appropriate PPE, and hand sanitizing stations should be available in the elevator lobbies as well as garage stairwells, with access to the lobby and street level be propped open if possible to reduce overcrowding in our elevators. In the future, you can expect office design and building operations to change. With technology and improvements to buildings' HVAC systems, a requirement to increase outside air intake will only help improve our air circulation going forward. You will also see a lot more technology implemented to increase the level of automation through such touchless and voice-activated building control systems like elevators, doors, and sinks and restrooms. Future building design is also likely to change with expanded common areas, elevators, and restrooms to allow for proper traffic flow. We wanted to include resource guides. Stephanie included a link here we thought was one of the better ones. Another group, Cushman & Wakefield, does also provide some good guidelines should you want to look that up as well. Okay, on to hotels. We pulled up a link here to a spot done on the news recently for hotel best practices. So at your leisure, you can actually review that later. But in it, it really just talks about the use of multiple lobby entrances and taking temperatures of guests at the entry. It talks in a little bit more in depth about the disinfecting rooms daily, the black light inspection for proper cleaning, mask and hand sanitizer kits being distributed to all their guests, as well as cleaning protocol for common areas to be cleaned on the hour. Going forward, all hotel interactions with guests should become touchless with mobile check-ins, mobile keys, texting for services, and a cashless, touchless payment system. Consider having guests sign a health declaration form upon check-in, including information for emergency contacts. Provide disposable masks and hand sanitizer stations throughout common areas, and restrict elevator occupancy to either one person or one family at a time. And as I mentioned earlier, fitness centers should be temporarily closed, or the option to space out the workout machine so that it will allow for social distancing. Obviously, providing sanitary wipes to wipe down equipment between usage. And as for pools, it is recommended to remain or keep them temporarily closed. However, some hotels are considering having them open for staycation guests. Obviously, reorganizing the pool seating and monitoring for social distancing is recommended. Other items include extensive cleaning before a guest occupies a room, and making it a practice that recently vacated rooms will actually sit empty for 1 to 3 days before a new guest is permitted to occupy that room. Next one. This is okay. Other best practices is limiting the exposure of our housekeeping staff to the hotel guests through reduced stayover services for occupied rooms. What I mean by this is limiting cleaning work in rooms of like multiple stay visitors. It has been suggested to provide clean linens and towels in a bag and leaving them at the front door for guests to use, then retrieving the bag with used linens, leaving them outside the door for the next day. Removing all non-essential objects, such as mini bars and other touchable objects like desk accessories and decorative objects are suggested. And limiting rooms occupied per floors to provide more efficient housekeeping service. It is also suggested, much like with the office, to schedule housekeeping staff on a staggered basis to help prevent overlap and moreover to prevent contact to different employees. And if not a practice already in your hotel, consider adding a public area restroom attendant to help maintain new cleanliness guidelines.
Thank you, Christina. That's great. I'm going to turn it over now to Carl.
Thank you. Beginning, I guess it was now 2 weeks ago, and ramped up a lot toward the end of last week, the city approved and the city council approved expanded outdoor dining opportunities. Of course, in phase one, restaurants are not permitted to have indoor dining, but are able to have 50% of their occupancy approximately in outdoor dining, as long as the tables are spaced appropriately. And what we found, of course, is that there's a great disparity in the availability of outdoor space for different restaurants. Some have either parking lots or other outdoor spaces that they can readily use, but others really need to, if they're going to have outdoor dining, they need to use the public right-of-way. So the City Council approved a relatively relaxed set of standards for restaurants to use the public right-of-way. That is the sidewalk in front of your building, the sidewalk, the parking spaces in front of your building, as well as other parking spaces if you get approval of the business next door, for example, so that we know that they've said okay to you using their parking space, quote unquote, their parking spaces for outdoor dining. And we processed about 35 applications in the first couple of days, and we're getting about 10 applications a day. So we are trying to stay on top of those. We've committed a 3-day turnaround. We've often gotten them done a lot earlier, but every site is a little bit different. Sometimes restaurants are very close to a very busy intersection, and so we need to worry about cars turning into a group of diners, things like that, that we do need to make sure that safety is permitted, but or maintained. But our job is to say, in to the extent possible, to say yes, and to say yes as quickly as we can. If we ask additional questions, please understand that we're just trying to make sure that safety is maintained. It is free normally. The city charges for use of the public right-of-way, but we're not doing that, nor are we charging for the applications either. The next slide, I think, has a little bit more information on outdoor dining.
Yes, and I think Alex is going to talk a little bit about the uses of parking spaces.
Great. Thank you, Alex.
Sure, I'd be happy to join in. As Carl mentioned, the application for outdoor dining can also be inclusive of on-street parking spaces. Something you may have seen that we rolled out in March when all of this began to happen were use of parking spaces for curbside pickup and delivery. We are still providing that. There's an example picture of one of those zones at the bottom, on the bottom right-hand corner. The person to contact to get a parking space converted near your business would be Kong Nguyen in the city's traffic engineering department. His email address is on the screen. But for converting parking spaces to outdoor dining, there are a number of things that the city is looking for. As Carl had mentioned, we need to be cognizant of adjacent traffic movements to make sure everything stays safe. We'd like to know the number of parking spaces that you or any adjacent tenants of yours may plan to use. We're looking for a sketch of a site plan for how you would lay out the tables consistent with social distancing guidelines put out by the state of Virginia. And we're also looking to comply with our own city guidelines that are available within the application. And this lays out some of the kind of things that the transportation department will be looking at. We want to make sure we maintain access to fire hydrants, loading zones, bus stops, and things of that nature. And one other thing for all of you all in the commercial real estate community is that the applicants, whether they are building owners or businesses, need letters of support from adjacent property owners and businesses, and potentially their own property manager. And so that might be something for you all to keep an eye out for, that businesses will be looking for your support in making these applications to the city. And we hope to get them turned around as fast as we can. So far, I would say the ones that are really in place have been an excellent example of how to make better use of our existing outdoor space, and hopefully the weather stays friendly.
One thing I'll just add, thank you, Alex. That was terrific. There was a question in the chat on this specific thing, so I might as well answer it now. It is when the council established it a week ago, or no, Tuesday night, I guess it was officially. It's been for all of us. I think time has been compressed, but they established it as basically 90 days. So if conditions change dramatically in that 90 days, the city manager does have the option of stopping the program before the 90 days is up. And conversely, if it's going well, there's also the potential that it might be extended. But for now, you can more or less count on a 90-day program.
Great. Next up, we'll turn it over to Erin.
Perfect. Thank you guys for joining us today. Sorry, I have my dog just called the mailman. Thank you guys for joining us today. Just to give you a brief overview.
We all understand, Erin, so we will be patient.
Thank you. I'm so sorry. Of course, of all times this would happen. So just to give you guys a brief overview of the program and how it works. Basically, all the information is on the city's website. There's an ALX Promise page. And it was a partnership between us and the Visit Alexandria group. And it's completely voluntary. But we're encouraging all businesses, and it doesn't just have to be restaurants, which is what people normally associate the health department with. So far, we've had over 250, I think, people who have registered, and those are ranging from restaurants to tour groups to boutiques. There are a lot of different office buildings, stuff like that. So we have our entire team working on it, and what you do is you sign up, we reach out to you, and we'll do a one-to-one session. We give you lots of information, checklists to follow. A lot of the information that was previously given, the best practices, is part of that. We answer any questions. We just ask that you train your employees on the safety measures in place. You complete a checklist, a training record. You sign a pledge saying that you're dedicated to opening your business safely for both your staff and for the public. And then we issue you a decal that you can post. There are also signage that we provide so you can show the public that you're taking this very seriously and that you're concerned for their safety as well as your own staff's. And hopefully it will help get the public a little bit more comfortable with coming out to your business. And then as new phases roll out, like phase 2, most of Virginia is entering today, we're already working on checklists to send out to people who have participated in phase 1 so that we can share any new updated information with them. So there's more information on that link below. And if anyone has questions, they can reach out to us as well.
Thank you, Erin. The last item we're going to cover before we get to any questions and answers, so if people have any questions, please feel free to submit more of them through the chat function, is the small business grant program that was launched yesterday. This is probably most important to you all to think about passing on to your tenants. Selfishly, you would probably be very interested in having your tenants receive grants so that they can return to profitability as soon as possible. But the idea behind these grants is that the city is looking to focus their resources that they're receiving from the CARES Act in 4 major categories. 1 is to provide food stability and availability to those who don't have it. 2 is to invest more in our health resources, like the Alexandria Health Department, to be able to manage this pandemic, but obviously any future issues, health issues, so that we're best prepared to manage them moving forward. The 3rd is helping residents pay apartment and living rent. And then the 4th is to help the small business community. So the B2B grants program, which launched yesterday, is accepting applications through Monday at 5 o'clock. It's available to businesses who have between 2 and 100 employees, and is broken into 3 amounts based on the employee size. The intent of the program is for these businesses to spend the dollars on things that they need to reopen or rescale successfully. And so we've listed here 5 examples of the types of expenses we have heard and know that businesses are taking on as they enter, as they go from phase 1, phase 2. The finalized grant criteria, so in order for a business to successfully apply, they must have had a 25% negative revenue impact from the emergency. They'll have to show us information, financial information year over year to demonstrate that impact. They have to be licensed here in the city. They must have a physical location, and they must be for profit and in good standing, meaning that they were up to speed on their taxes and payments due to the city prior to the pandemic. We are asking them as part of the application process to demonstrate that they intend to remain in the city. And so some of the ways that they might do that is talk to us about the lease terms that they have, to be able to demonstrate that they're not shutting down their business. One of the things we're asking for is to make sure that they're not in a bankruptcy proceeding. We also have made this program available to any business that's locally owned and operated. So a franchise of a larger corporate entity would be eligible. A corporately owned unit would not be. We also have excluded from the grant program financial institutions, grocery stores, pharmacies, and gas stations, because those businesses were not impacted by the governor's executive orders. They didn't have to shut down. They didn't have to operate in reduced capacity throughout the crisis. And with that, we're ending the first part of our presentation. So we'll pause here for a second to see if there are any additional questions or comments. We'll look to the chat function for that. And if not, we can ask our colleague Tom to share some information about outlook for the hospitality industry.
So Stephanie, just want to make sure that that we've had an opportunity for all the questions, and then I'm going to share a screen. So if you have questions relating to anything you've already seen, why don't you put those up through the chat function while I go to the share screen. All right. Stephanie, is the hotel update page visible?
No, we cannot see it yet.
Okay. That's
Here we go.
all right. Okay. Love this technology. It's just like learning every day. So there are a lot of slides here. I know we have relatively few folks on the phone, so I'm going to cruise through them. If you have questions, I would say please reach out to me afterwards, and I can either share the presentation or go back and answer any questions. But just want you to know what we're seeing. Okay. So the first thing is just in terms of hold on one second. Try and get to the right size here. There we go. We've been doing business impact surveys relatively regularly. We were doing them every 2 weeks. We've now gone to a monthly format. And what we're seeing in the hotel sector for the month of May is that business was down about 70%, which is actually, it turns out, the same number that we're seeing for the community as a whole. We follow STR and their national hotel forecast. And so you can see here the actual for 2019, and then projections for the year we're in and for 2021. And in occupancy nationally, occupancy was at 66%. It's basically projected to finish at 36% for calendar year 2020 and rebound to 52% in 2021. Revenue per available room, you can see it was $87 last year, falling to $37 in the current year and coming back up to $55 in 2021, but obviously still well short of where we were nationally the year before at $87. We've also been following a lot of consumer sentiment data. This information is coming out all the time. So the first thing we're seeing is that there are consumers definitely concerned about their financial well-being. Those numbers are improving a little bit, but still there are 3 people who are worth the money compared to every one who is not. So that's better, but still not good. Safety, similar. It had peaked at 10 people concerned for every one who was not. Now to 5 who are concerned to everyone who is not, but obviously that means 5 out of 6 people are concerned about safety before they travel. Questions about what feels safe, and I guess the good news here is that you can see that hotels are relatively near the bottom of this chart, which means that those are things that people feel more safe with. But you've still got, 44% of the population feeling some anxiety about being in a hotel, and that's one of the better numbers. Folks were asked how they, if there were safety guidelines stated, issued by state or local government, would it increase their likelihood of visiting? And you can see that 50% said they would be more interested in visiting, and that was one of the premises behind the creation of the ALX Promise program and why we think it's so important, and why we're gratified that there are 250 businesses who have applied. One of the other things we're watching is whether local residents are resistant to visitors coming into their community. And you can see several weeks ago there was a lot of resistance to it. 2/3 of people were resistant. That's come down to 55%. It is moving in the right direction. But one of the things that, as folks in the hospitality sector, we need to be sensitive to is that our residents may be nervous about who is coming in from other places. Conference outlook still seems there's not a lot of motion here. Still seems like there's a lot of reticence to participate in conferences or conventions until the situation is resolved. You can see it has been hovering in the low 70s all the way along and not a lot of movement there. On the positive front, although people aren't acting yet, there seems to be a lot of interest in it. Here we have a survey. How excited are you? I miss traveling. I can't wait to get out and do it again. And you've got over 2/3 of people agreeing with that sentiment. So folks want to get back to traveling. They're just anxious about it. Similarly, how ready are they? What you can see is that about 20% of people are ready to go now. They're either already traveling or ready to travel without hesitation. The next category is really important. 30% who are ready to travel but feeling some hesitation. And then about half the population is not ready to travel yet. One of the things that will impact that is what they see people around them doing. So when the question was asked, if a good friend or a family member invited you to join them for a weekend getaway sometime the next month, would you go? And that number is moving up. And interestingly, that number is now close to 60%. So it suggests that although people aren't acting yet, with a little nudge from people they respect and trust, they would do so. And that's a hopeful sign for us in terms of sentiment beginning to shift. We also saw intent to travel in the fall declining, I think, as we got closer, but it's now starting to pick back up again, suggesting that as states are going to some of the reopening phases, that people are now becoming more open to travel again. Folks were also asked how excited they were to learn about, to get travel information and hear about travel experiences, and this is also picking up now above 50%, and that's a big jump from the prior week. In terms of pricing, this one surprised us a little bit. When people were asked, would a discount or price cut, was it something that they were looking for and would motivate them in the next 3 months? About 1/3 of people said yes, but that means about 2/3 of people weren't really moved by pricing. So I think it's a consideration, but it does not look like that will be the primary motivator. It seems like pent-up demand and interest in travel is actually the thing that they're looking for, along with flexibility. Big shift to regional travel. Because of the coronavirus, I'll probably be taking more road trips this year. Strong sentiment towards road trips, and only 14% disagreeing with that sentiment. So at Visit Alexandria, how this is translating into our strategies. First, we are focusing very heavily on drive markets. So we'll be looking to start initially with our own DC Metro as well as things within a 3-hour radius. We will be emphasizing our role as the #3 best small city in the country. Talking about Getaway, our historic charm, our drivability, value, flexibility, and safety standards. Those will all be integral parts of the messaging we're sending out. The product that we put together and hotels have signed up for is what's called our Flex Getaway hotel package. So we have the lowest offering we've received in that category has been from $69 a night, which is quite reasonable, but we have a number of others under the $100 threshold. The most important factor is that it's fully flexible. Hotel stays normally are flexible, so that's not a huge lift for us, but it's something we want to emphasize in our messaging. We're also creating an incentive that if anyone does it for more than a single night, essentially 2 nights or more, they'll get the added value of free overnight hotel parking and 2 Key to the City attractions passes. It is valid all year, so that folks can book it now and still come later in the fall. And we want to emphasize that it's good for visiting friends and family, because we know for many people that will be the initial reason that they travel. This is an early draft of a digital ad that we're running, and you can see it opens with the best small city image and the waterfront, and it's sort of a family experiencing that. The words nearby to emphasize affordable and flexible, and then closes with the offer of $69 a night, reinforcing that name, Flex Getaway. So that's the positioning that we're looking at. Aaron talked earlier about the ALX Promise program, so I will not go into that here, but we're pleased with the response. And then on the meetings and group sales side, even though we don't have a ton of meetings materializing yet, we know a lot of people are rebooking. We will focus on our strength in Alexandria, which is small meetings. Fortunately, those are the most likely to meet first. In phase 2, we'll be going up to capacity of 50 people. So that will enable that to happen. Focusing also on regional within the immediate area, and then hybrid meetings where some folks are remote and some folks are present. And then again, reinforcing that #3 best small city accolade. And that's what I've got. So again, I sort of raced through those to be sensitive to our time, and if there are questions, I'll be happy to take them now or at another time. But with that, thanks for including me today.
Thank you.